St. Quantums. The alternate band's going to be. After looking over a piece of popular literature, a voice said, "Who writes this shit?" Then a second asked, "Who reads this shit?" And a third voice joined in, "Who reviews this shit?" Then arose a fourth one that asked, "Who published the reviews of this shit?" Then up popped a fifth voice which inquired, "Who are all of you guys anyway?" To which they all replied, "Why, where are you, you dumb shit? Who'd you think?" And he didn't have an immediate reply. Over in a nearby city is a man who keeps his mind tuned only to the top 40 station. "Cause," says he, "they play nothing but the hits. That is, my favorites all the time." Over in a neighboring galaxy is a legend that says that the corners of man's mouth are directly, though secretly, connected to the depth of his understanding. And in an unrelated story, one man says that it doesn't seem possible for him to die just yet. In that, despite his expressed desire to the contrary, he feels sure that at his funeral services, the words of some third party will be in tribute read. Or put another way, says he, "I ain't going out thinking somebody else's thoughts," which are about as good a mystical words to live by as you can get. A wandering troubadour said to the local prince, "Tell me all about your life and I'll tell you how big a fool you are." And the monarch replied, "But you don't know anything about me. You don't even know if I am a fool." To which the minstrel responded, "If you'll tell me all about your life, you're a clod all right. No doubt about that." Only the simple of mind can come to verbal conclusions regarding the purpose of life. And of course, they're incorrect. And this entry from our New Intelligence Vocational Descriptions: a calling, an undertaking of such dubious value that its practitioners fear to simply call it a job. Don't anybody let Jimmy Swaggart rush the stage and attack me. Or Dr. Freud's grandson, or anybody. Man is born on a playground, and with full access to all of its amusements thereon, in his childhood happily thrives. But then he matures, his bones and brains become firm, and he begins to limit himself to the seesaws and merry-go-round. Thus is civilization and mental reliability realized, without man having to be physically moved from his birthplace. The enlightened free themselves from within, and in secret reach a new promised land. Time for another chapter of If, for instance. If, for instance, there are 10 pillars supporting reality, there would in that case be 4 unknown to ordinary consciousness and thus apparently unnecessary. Now, the tricky part is that mere thought will never reveal which 4 it is. I need to reread that one. I had to rewrite it as I stood here. If, for instance, there are 10 pillars supporting local reality, there would be, in that case, 4 unknown to ordinary consciousness. Now, the tricky part is if, for instance, there are 10 pillars supporting local reality, there would, in that case, be 4 that are unnecessary. Now, the tricky part is that mere thought will never reveal which 4 it is. Give me a rewrite person with an actual pen instead of just a, what you call it? Only the routine travelers in the terminal give attention to the calling of every bus's arrival and departure. The more alert certainly hear the announcements. They just understand their importance and treat them accordingly. Mortal convulsion. I'm sorry, that should be moral conclusion. Pinocchio can't properly disregard the puppeteer until he fully understands the nature of his prior apparent master. Using our guide to modern city life, we could say that the truly sophisticated are those who can damn near make gossip sound interesting. Verbal memory, man's singular gift. Definition, history. A kind of metaphor for what actually happened. Thinking, sort of a metaphor for actual consciousness. Ordinary existence, a symbol for real living. And now for some definitions. Words, the kinds of things you can substitute for other words and no one can tell the difference. A mystic, okay, someone who can tell but doesn't care. Not unlike the body's management of pain, when understanding becomes too acute to the mind, perception will pass out. There is a certain constant percentage of people who will never even suspect what life is about. And if you must look around to see who they might be, save your effort. The mystical army, the only one that's open to everybody, won't tell you it's subjective, and is almost impossible to join. Dichotomies, the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches of those more conscious and hungry. And now a visibility update. With but 2 eyes, no creature can properly perceive a 3D reality. How life goes, or which came first, the transmitter or the receiver? Sometimes things went well and sometimes they didn't. And one guy thought, I guess it's up to me to tell the difference. And now another episode of It Stands to Reason. Since it requires no conscious effort to simply exist, it stands to reason that those who want to do more than simply exist must do more than the no effort required to do otherwise. No, I will not reread it. Could, but won't. As with the remainder of nature, there is literature and thought that runs downhill, and that less gross, more complex, which aspires to rise. As per the legends of this one world, the more conscious are known as the detail men, and the ordinary as the oblivious. While on a neighboring world, the everyday are still known by that label, but the awakened are called the overall people. Does this make any sense to you? And now for this important message from New Intelligence's Crime Watch. Mechanical Talk, a.k.a. Babel, is an active felonious participant in the Days Gang. A street corner speaker so spoke. God gave man the gift of the personal anecdote so that anything needed proved can be proved. Proverb update. The mental civilizations of man are no mere attempts to make silk purses from sow's ears, nay, but far beyond that. They are the construction and operation of pig farms in a land with no native swine. The activities of one city asked a mystic, "Tell the truth, how do you find me?" And he replied, "Funny if you're not serious, and pathetic if you are." Of what interest to the heroic mind is news concerning the rabble? To where can the heroic mind look for an alternative save to itself? Today's secret tip. The only thing that those with the potential to be more conscious need to do to be more conscious is to continually try. Today's secret question. In the above is the key word try or continually. Today's snapshot from the family album. A lad asked his father, the general, "Papa, describe it to me once again." "Gladly, my boy. Consciousness without controlled attention is a mighty cannon without balls." Now, revealed here, tonight, for the very first time, the two sows of awakening to the secret. The first one is simply the sow of recognition, to wit, so. And the second one is, so that's why it can't be described. Local reality is like a floating city, suspended forever in midair, supported solely by the mind of man. Mystics are perennially purported to live elsewhere. Enlightenment, the world's most exclusive drug. Came to mind on the basis of, considering again, not for any real external educational purpose, but everyone's interest, many people's interest in the apparent history of some secret conspiracy, some mystical transcendental effort, etc., this kind of stuff, even those who are never active participants. Tying that to the several very, very unsuccessful, if indeed they were intended to be humorous, attempts presented here of late regarding the possibility that it is not mystics and the enlightened that know the secret of life. It's everyone knows the secret of life, and everyone else, as soon as they realize it, thought, screw this, more or less. And they just went on about their business and thought, I got to get through another 60 or 70 years here in this damn funny farm, this bus station, this planet. Who needs that? And that in one sense, I notice again how much cheer, pleasure this brings to many faces here to consider the possibility that, wait a minute, I'm part of the select few. I've worked all this time trying to get to the moment of understanding, and you keep making these jokes that everybody else already knows it, and they just not, forget it. Another way to look at it, tying it to all of that, I was saying enlightenment, I was giving a definition. Enlightenment, the world's most exclusive drug. Think that the whole idea of there being people who have understood the nature of life out in the public forum, they're always considered after the fact historically and by ordinary minds, they're always then they have to be given the attributes of something supernatural. The obvious one being Jesus was the Son of God, and etc. That they were not humans. All of this entails, whatever the secret was, whatever a Jesus or an Abraham, Muhammad, Zoroaster, anything that they might have known was in some way a secret. And that the only way you can know the secret, the crude version being, is that the secret is actually a verbal talisman or a key, a verbal secret, a piece of knowledge. It's either that or the secret is that you must put yourself consciously, intellectually, spiritually, intellectually. I don't know why I keep bothering to talk to children even. Intellectually, you've got to put yourself in such a condition as to be open to this information. That's the other version. Same thing. Because what it infers is that there is something that is unknown, either the secret itself or what's unknown is how to put yourself consciously, how to get yourself in such a condition that you're open to it. This is a slight variation now. At least you jump to concussions. What if the Enlightenment, let's call it that for a second, the thing of the Buddhas of the history of this planet, of men who just devoted their lives up to a certain point, who devoted their lives to the point of trying to understand what life was about. And simple example, the story of a Buddha that after all this time, one night, normally referred to as enlightenment, one of the souls. So, how strange can the soul be? How strange, how extraordinary can whatever the secret is, how strange, extraordinary, transcendental, incomprehensible can it be? Now those who are interested in such matters would say, well, the epitome of strangeness and et cetera, et cetera. But notice this. It's got to be strange, unfathomable, miraculous, within certain confines. It's got to be miraculous, unbelievable within the confines of being believable, of being capable of comprehension by an ordinary mind. So what if the secret is not as miraculous, not as strange as you would want to believe? I say you now, someone who actually involves themselves in the search for the great mystery and enlightenment, etc. That it's got to be extraordinary. There is no alternative to that kind of encouragement or that kind of direction once you start. No matter what book you get, no matter how sane, no matter how deranged, no matter how contemporaneous, no matter how far removed from you temporally it might be, if you find one that seems to strike you, whatever it was, books on Zen, books on Buddhism, Sufism, whatever, and you begin to read it and you begin to think about it in a certain way, and they all lead to the same point of there's something lacking, there's something additional that you could have. Enlightenment, being more conscious, being more awake in some way to reality. And whichever one you find doesn't matter, and you go, yeah, that's it. This is it. And at least you're pleased to know that you're not alone on this planet. And most people are pleased. The way it normally works is you first find traces of it thousands of years removed from you. And so the first assurance is, this is nothing new. I'm not alone. I am not crazy, and I'm not wasting my time, because here it is 2,000 years ago. I can read it. I can hear this. I wish I'd been alive, because whoever said that, they're my kind of person. That's it. And you keep turning the pages like, well, tell me. What is it? What do you realize once you do become more conscious, once you are enlightened, and they never the hell tell you? But at least you're assured it has happened, that's it. And you do not question. No one. Doesn't matter who you are, you do not question whichever groove you fall into, whichever form, whichever field seems to magnetically attract your attention. You do not question the fact that there is a goal to it, that there is a payoff of being more conscious, being more awake, being enlightened, rejoining to the Godhead, to the source of creation. Union with the center of the universe. You do not question it. Whichever one strikes you, go, yeah. But then what if the enlightenment, what if being more conscious, and to say be more conscious, it's a fairly common one that keeps popping up, and you say that, it also tacitly implies to be more conscious is not just something in general. You don't say, well, if you work hard and you meditate and you starve yourself and you're lucky, you can undergo something such as the Buddha did, and we call it here, this particular school, we call it be more conscious, being more conscious. And you go, that's it, I like it, that's it. Here I am. You do not take being more conscious as simply a vague description of your neurochemical condition. You take that whole term of being more conscious as being something specific, such as being, the goal of this, they might say, is to be more conscious, and the part that's unsaid is to be more conscious and to see life as it is, to see man as he is, to see what's going on. That just being more conscious is nothing. It'd be like having a better tuner, better receiver, in this, speaking in a stereo sense. You got stereo as good as anybody else, a receiver, and you're picking up all the stations, and you work all this hard, you get enlightened, you're a receiver, and you get to a higher, your consciousness becomes a receiver completely out of the ordinary. But what good would it do if you got suddenly this new transcendental receiver and nobody's broadcasting, is the point. So even though they may not state it, to be more conscious implies not that you are simply a better receptacle or a better receiver. It is that you will definitely, Buddha didn't just go, I'm enlightened. Everybody around him, they understood the term. They didn't mean it. It's like, now I'm enlightened. They knew, well, And then they asked him, what? And he never did tell them what, but then that nobody ever notices historically that after the Buddhas and Mohammeds, and they say, well, how do you do what you did? What is it you saw? I should say is what they actually first asked. And he doesn't tell them that. He starts telling them how he did it. And of course then, if he was really a real guy, he lied to them anyway. Because he knew it wasn't doing any good. You can't just say, well, here's exactly what I did. Well, that's what ordinary people want to hear. They will pay big money for it. Of course, it's never the guy who did it. As I was telling you, the real mystics, if they did exist, the Buddhas and the rest of them, they did not live out their mystical life in public. They didn't write all that. They probably didn't do all that. That's not the point. But it was somebody after them. And that's when the follower showed up and says, you actually knew Buddha. Oh, yeah, I was there all the time. Yeah. Do you know how he did it? Yep. Watched him from beginning to end. But you'd never get a Buddha, you'd never get a Moses and say, you know it, don't you? And he might go, well, how'd you do it? I mean, let's assume you were sharp enough and you said, I can skip all this bullshit about you're the son of God or you're something supernatural. Because as a matter of fact, I think my sister married your first cousin. I remember you used to play, we used to play in a damn band over here before they run us out of Damascus. They go, yeah. In other words, I ain't buying this stuff. Whatever it is, you got it since you've been alive. Yeah. And they said, how'd you do it? A Moses, the actual mystic, is not going to tell anybody. As I said, if he did, he'd lie to you, and I don't mean necessarily lie. If he did, he'd just tell you most anything because he knew that what worked on him is irrelevant. He is not going to tell you his life story, and if you insisted, he would lie to you. He'd tell you somebody else's life story. But he's not going to tell you his. He just knows a waste of time. But then after that, the next generation is when you start making a few bucks off this. It begins to stabilize. It becomes a system because then somebody will be around. There'll always be a Fatima to Muhammad or a Paul to Jesus. There'll be somebody around later, the next generation, and you say, you were there, right? And now you're kind of in charge. All right, can I join up here? Is this where I get the books and the courses? Yeah, this is it. I mean, this is the official one if you want the real one. He says, all right, now, I don't mind. I'll join up and I'll buy the books. But now, you know exactly how he did it. Oh, I was there all the time. I mean, you know what foods he was eating and when he prayed or when he met. Oh, yeah, the whole thing. People want to hear that. I'm not making fun of it. But that is second generation. And I'm being charitable about that. It's useless. But notice, it would, if I had not pointed that out, and some of you, it still probably wouldn't stop you, if right now, if you were assured whoever you thought your spiritual hero had been in the past, if somebody said, Yogi so-and-so or Zen teacher so-and-so, we have now, nobody knew it, but he just died 50 years ago. Oh yeah, I've been reading all his books. We've got a guy, it just came out. It's an old man, he's about 80 years old, nobody knew he existed, but he was there from the beginning with him. And he is now, he's about to die, and he's trying to build some sort of monument. Anyway, for 50% of everything you own or $10,000, whatever comes first, he has written down, and he's only going to let people, you got to go there in person, take the money, and he has written down exactly. It's less than 100 pages, we understand, but he has written down specifically what so-and-so did. Now, if you were already wired up, and all of you had some sort of spiritual hero to start with, some sort of mystical idea of where this was leading, I'm not making fun of it. You would have sat there and considered, could I raise that much money? You know, should I do this? Because, if you were really convinced, they said, this guy has written down exactly everything he did, and he was there with him. And especially they got a little more specific. One of them had hit you, they said, his diet, maybe that didn't get you. And they'd say, how many hours you slept a night? Maybe that didn't get you. You know, his attitude towards sex, which probably get everybody's interest a little bit. But anyway, he named, he says, now they go through that and he tells when he meditated, what he thought about. And he told the kinds of things that he tried to picture as he meditated. And it went down. You would be very tempted for it to be specific, because that's some of would-be mystics' complaints in the beginning when there's, like everyone, you stumble first in religion, you find out it's too vague. It is not specific enough. And so to hear that there was something specific, you'd be very tempted to consider it. Now back to mysticism, the world's most exclusive drug. Assuming that I am giving you a valid detailing of that, you still are stuck, your mind is, not you, your nervous system is stuck with the belief that any increase in its capacity, enlightenment, is not simply a passive, it is not simply a neurochemical expansion of the receiving mechanism, because there's got to be something to receive. What's the sense of being more conscious if you get more conscious and you find out there's no new information? So you immediately assume, it goes without saying, that there is some information, that the Buddhas of the world of history do not get enlightened and go, so. I mean, if that's all they say, you still know soul meant something. There he sat and he went, I mean, you just look. I'm trying to give you the little cheap theatrics. If he goes, and you're there, one of the monks, they're trying to observe, and you've all been working all these years. And he says, I'm going to sit here until I get it. I'm sick of this. And he sits, and he sits, and he sits. And they take turns watching, just in case. And he just sits. He sits and sits after 30 years of all he went through, and then suddenly goes, jeez. Of course, I'm sure it's historically, it'd make you be a little more impressive if the clouds rolled and thunder and lights went off behind and the bow tree went, ooh. But still he goes, so. The so, means something. That is, he went, ha! Now I see it. All right, to see it means it, something. Like what? What if the Enlightenment is a kind of drug that originally is so common, in case you forgot your place, it's not, what's the concussions though? What if it is so widespread? What if it is so non-secretive? What if it is so all-encompassing that no one notices it save a very few, and that's what makes it exclusive? Are they having any sort of convolution playoffs tonight? And if so, may I humbly submit myself for consideration in this. Do you understand? I'm not trying to make light and I'm not trying to take the fun out, because if it wasn't fun, we wouldn't continue to do it. I assure you that. But what if the secret, if I ask everyone, if we ask all the mystics throughout history, all the would-be students of such as this, or if I ask you, take it either way that you can stand it, and if I just say, well, what do you suspect it is? I mean, the whole thing that the Buddhas of the world went, shh. What is it you think that they saw? Now, everyone would have some, you might not want to bet your life on it, and you might be, in fact, alert enough to start with to know that anything you come up with has got to be a little off. But still, you would, without any doubt, you would say, well, it's got to be something. And it's probably, and you would say, it was probably in this area, or he saw more or less. And you could even say, if you'd read enough, after the fact, you might say, well, in fact, he hinted enough, or he said this and that. And you put it all together, and I figure it's got to be somewhere sort of over here. I mean, it has to do with such and such. More or less, it's got to be. But then you also, by covering yourself that way, or by being intelligent, by being perceptive enough to correctly assume that you cannot even speculate, that if you came up with theoretically the right kind of words, so what? If you don't understand, it's meaningless. A tacit part within the tacit part is that the whole thing about being enlightenment, the whole point about being blown away, of going into some altered state, is that the information is so astounding that you just can't compare it. I mean, it takes a complete different level of consciousness. What is that? What if that's not a really, really good description? How was that? I refer you back to the two souls revealed for the first time tonight. See if it makes, I know a lot of you enjoyed it, but I'll do it again. Revealed the first time the two souls. And in the word soul. The two souls of awakening to the secret. That was the title. There are two of them. It's not just the Buddha going, it's not just enlightenment. There are two stages. Now they happen so fast. If we were fooling around still with the local time zones, you might think they were simultaneous, but follow me. There are two souls. The first one is so. That's the second one is so. That's why it can't be described. There are actually two, see. And even if you hear that, and you were an ordinary mind, you would still be very inclined to refer back to what we're already talking about, that, it is so astounding, it is so extraordinary that it can't be described. Now, that's not what I said about the second soul. I didn't throw that in now. I just said the first soul is what everybody has always thought. I'll leave it at that. So. Or do your own version. So. I was thinking mine sounded like too much of a Norse, Germanic, warlike soul, but I'm sure the more spiritually inclined, the more genteel, the sissies and wimps in our spiritual audience, they want to imagine the Buddhas and the people going, so. Yeah, I know. So do your own version. Anyway, the first soul is after a lifetime sitting. So. But then there's a second one that's never taken into account. But notice I don't say what it is. I told you all I intended to. The second one is, first is so. Then, so that's why nobody could tell me what it was. So that's why it can't be described. But the ordinary mind would fill in its own explanatory tag to the sentence. So that's why it couldn't be described. Because blah, 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 blah. Which even ordinary intelligence, I notice, or you should notice, people never give that any heed in life. You want convoluted? You want complex? I'll back up and hit that one. So that's why it can't be described. An ordinary mind goes, it can't be described. I know why it can't be described, and then it tells itself. It's a sign of a sane, non-mystical mind. That you go, well, I bet it's because of so-and-so. Right, sir, good going. At least that kind of person does not run the risk. They do not have to look for anti-awakening antidotes. Or, they don't have to wear charms to protect themselves from being more conscious. Everything's all right. They can safely look around to see which percentage I'm talking about, the constant percentage of humanity that will never even suspect what's going on here. You remember? And I pointed out it was an energy-saving tip. I just didn't. Was that if you have to look around to see exactly what percentage or who they might be, save yourself the effort. At least you're safe. What if the exclusivity of enlightenment is on the basis? Now, I want to refine it a little bit. I am not inferring that everyone experienced the initial soul. Because if all of humanity knows originally secret, it does you no good because it came pre-verbalization. That the information, enlightenment, if knowing the secret of life, is not a secret to everything alive. Ordinary people do not know it any more than does an ox or a pig. But that doesn't mean that they do not know. They're alive. So what drives people, the would-be mystics? And I don't keep bringing this up as a joke, even though I jump back and forth from one foot to the other and say, well, I'm not trying to take the fun out, and I'm not saying that's absolutely true, literally true. But what if I am giving a fair description that the exclusivity is on the basis that everyone had a chance to see it? That genetically, how could everyone not know it? How could everyone be immune from the knowledge that the entire genetic network of life has? But then what drives some people, and it would be easy for ordinary people to discount them at a contemporary level. I mean, if there was a Buddha right now, if there's somebody you can't compare, but let's say there's somebody of the level of Muhammad or Buddha or Confucius, that was right now doing that, what would ordinary people do? I'm talking about sane ordinary people, presidents, your mother, your father, your best friends, educators. If somebody said, did you know there's a guy over here, and they found out that he was doing something, turned into a contemporary picture, doing something similar to a Buddha. And there are people attempting it now. I don't have to keep saying that. People attempting that seem to have devoted their whole time, their energy in life, to putting themselves into some new state of consciousness, to try and reach a state of enlightenment. You do know what the mainstream of life here and in all parts of the world, it varies a little bit, but the mainstream of life, their attitude, if you point it out specifically, if you get the obvious pillars that support local reality, the bankers, the bourgeoisie, the educators, every sane, decent, ordinary person on this planet, and you get their attention for a second, and you start talking about mysticism or monks, whatever, you get their attention enough that they know what you're talking about, and you say, do you know there are people spend their whole life, they still do that? They go, yeah, I know that. Well, do you know there's been men doing that for thousands of years, as far back as we find history? You had the Egyptians, they had people doing it there, and you had them doing the Sumerians. Yeah, I know all that. What do you think of that? I mean, they keep going, and I've met a few. And, anyway, some of them are now famous, Buddhas and Jesus. They then, even if they were not religious, they will want to make an exception to that, which I'll get to. Don't lose your place. It's all around the same circle. But if you ask them, what do you think about people like that? Now, you do know whatever words they use, and they might be genteel and civilized enough not to verbally assault the people, but they're going to say, that's kind of outside the mainstream of life, to say the least. I don't see what that has to do with living. It seems as though, anyway, they could go on and on. If they showed any intellectual, theoretical interest, they could say, well, it seems to me that an ordinary person should be able to get what they need along those spiritual lines from their religion. Maybe they need to go be more religious. Maybe they need count. I don't know. The point is, if you said, well, can you conceive of doing that? No. And if you really pushed it, they'd begin to suspect probably your sanity. If you said, you can't imagine just turning your whole life into trying to, whatever term that they would buy, to reach enlightenment, to become one with God, to be more conscious, anything that they would theoretically go, yeah, I got the term. And you said, you can't imagine devoting your life to that? And if you sort of insisted, they would really then, instead of taking it even at a rather objective, debating level, they'd begin to draw away from you. Because they think, no, I know there are people doing that, and I don't care, but no. You can't spend your life doing something like that. So now, to go back around the other side of the campfire for a second, that is a fair telling, but then they refuse to see, just the way life is wired up, when that has existed. And again, I know I'm playing both sides, which you should be able to follow. The religions of the world, the Jesuses and Muhammads and Buddhas and etc., just the way they're taken historically. They represent the same sort of thing, except they no longer represent a threat, and they no longer represent that picture of it being outside the mainstream of walking around sanity. And this includes now what you got to catch right quick. It's no big deal. Or it's not that difficult. It shouldn't be to catch. Is even people who are not religious. All they got to be is sophisticated, well-read. And they may not believe that, for instance, Jesus was the Son of God. They may not believe that Muhammad had angels come down from Allah and in his illiterate brain make him able to read just nothing. He couldn't even read if it was there, but he just read it in thin air, just floated there, and he read out to somebody the full Quran, 500 or 600 or 700 pages, and just did it. No. God didn't speak to somebody. They may not say that, but the point is, they accept theoretically that something extraordinary happened as part of man's institutions now, but it does not seem that strange. You understand? Even if they're not a Muslim, if they're well read by now and sophisticated, they do not look upon the idea of a Muhammad and him being able to, he said that the stories say that there was an illiterate man and he came out with this beautiful book, all just complex whole idea, this whole schematic, a new model of what reality is, that no, he wasn't nuts. I don't know what it is. It's something extraordinary. The point is, you now distance yourself from it. When I say you, the mainstream of life, and it no longer appears to be that insane. Now I know you can take people here and there that would still fit my definition of being mainstream sane and say, don't you really think that people like, if a Muhammad existed or a Jesus in this story, if he actually said this, I mean the guy had to be neurotic. I mean he probably had some sort of personality problems. And you will get people go, well yeah, I've always suspected that. I mean who's going to say, let's say a non-Christian could be discussing this with you, and I know that there are people, and it's an old story, that would say, well now, his moral teachings or the ideas he had about how society should operate were very good. I approve of them. They are psychologically valid, even by today's standards. But the idea that he's saying that God told him that he's the Son of God, if he actually said that, now come on. And this person look at you like, you don't believe that shit, do you? But the point is, they do not any longer find it frightening. Even if they're not a follower of that religion, it is now one of the visible pillars of reality. A human institution. Whether you agree with it or not, it is now part of the civilized fabric. Which remember is just floating. The only thing supporting it is man's imagination or man's mind. I gave you guys the full version tonight. That is reality. That is civilization. Not our physical bio-survival level of reality, but the one that singles us out. Well, that makes man unique is this thing is floating in midair. It's never fully realized, and in a sense it does not exist. The only thing that supports that son of a bitch is man's mind. Now, if I'd wanted to be more forceful, I would have said man's imagination, but that's so easy for them to, you think, yeah, that's true. I don't like civilization. I don't like working and paying taxes. No, you missed it, so, if you did that. It is floating here, is in midair, it never lands, which I could refer you back to all the ideas of heavens and paradises that all the historical prophets could never exactly say, how does this work? Especially after Copernicus and Galileo and little lens makers in the Netherlands with nothing better to do started making telescopes, and people kept looking up and go, I don't see heaven. I don't see any old man. They had to keep revising it like, well, maybe it was allegorical. That was it. Maybe. But at least the idea that there is some other level and it's kind of floating around. You can't actually get your hands on it. You can't bring it to earth. And of course, after that, there's simplistic versions of, well, it's invisible, it's hidden, and you got to die, and then you'll be there. Can you imagine how? Can you imagine the kind of passion with which ordinary people want to travel, that they believe is the greatest trip they'll ever take, by God, is when I'm dead? Does that make you go, well? That they're satisfied, well, here we are stuck, but that's all right. When I'm dead, boy, am I going to take a trip. But right now, I mean, I'm sort of busy. Busy being there workable euphemism for inert. And I don't mean physically. What drives people to devote so much time, a few people, to this? And we will bypass the possibility, which you either know for yourself or not, that being insane is not part of it. If you are insane, then you missed it somewhere. You got on the wrong bus, you moved too far to the back, and you're sitting with all those guys with the brown paper sacks and the bat wings of gin. Not even good gin. Cheap gin in the back. You got in the wrong seat on the wrong bus. You look out the wrong window. If you're crazy, I can put it simply, you're not a mystic, which is good to ordinary people because, like I said, there are plenty of them in the ordinary world. If you push the idea that, hey, you may not think it, and you got a PhD and all that. If you started pushing somebody, and you're supposed to be the world's leading expert in theology or philosophy or psychiatry, this whole idea, you worrying about reality around here and people having neuroses and warped sense of reality, I got news for you. There are people that see a whole other world here. They don't even see the reality you see. The psychiatrist would think, you got any money for treatment? In other words, they think if you put it that way, you're nuts. And of course, you talk to them like that, you would be nuts, but you understand it is the safeguard built in a sense, that if you're crazy, you're not a mystic. But that is one of the common characteristics attributed to mystics. Oh, they're nuts, right? To disregard them at all. To think, well, you should pay more attention to the teachings of Jesus or a Buddha. I know you're not religious, but you ought to pay attention. You can always dismiss them, an ordinary person, whether they do it throughout their lifetime, but ad hoc for the moment, they can go, people like that are crazy. That's easy to say. If you're crazy, you're not a mystic. It's got nothing to do with craziness. Well, I'd been through some of this. It's like you can sit on, there's a thin partition between being crazy and being a mystic, if that makes you happy. But how about this? There's an even thinner one between being sane and being a mystic. See, that's the point. Think about that. Which is back to where I was trying to take us. Is mysticism being the world's most exclusive drug? It is a chemical reaction. It is a neural reaction. It's got nothing to do with a man's heart, nothing to do with his spirit. It has to do with the brain itself. And it is a kind of drug. Because in that sense, I assume you know by now, I use drug in a non-addictive, non-injurious sense. But it is indeed a drug. But anything you think's a drug. Cheap literature, expensive literature, TV, radio. Staring at a blank wall, staring at a wall with stripes. The activity of the brain entails the neurotransmitters of drugs. Drugs are normally used, as we all know, operatively speaking, as the induction of something new. That you're sitting around and people do not think about their brain operating on drugs. They're not supposed to, but normally when you say drugs, you mean, well, something new ingested. Alcohol, cocaine, an unexpected emotional nervous system shock can be a drug. It's not normally thought about it, but great fear, great sorrow. I'm talking about, of an exceptional nature that somebody close to you dies. That kind of shock. You're not yourself, as they say, but it is like a drug. The whole idea of knowing a secret, of being enlightened, the enlightenment itself is a drug because it's an area of the brain being lighted up that has not been lighted up. But what if, when it's lighted up, what is seen and what is known is not extraordinary? Not extraordinary in the sense that, to twist my opening statement back around, you would think, if you're interested in such as this, I could have started and said the enlightenment, or the secret of enlightenment, the world's most exclusive drug. Do you see the difference? No? We see the first one, there was supposed to be, and you were supposed to sense a certain kind of sardonic tone to it. All right, never mind. That's what I get for trying to be subtle and trying to teach you the British pronunciation of the word. Now, let's run around real fast. It's a good thing about being at the end. The mystical secret, everyone that's ever been interested in it, even those theoretically, but especially those that are really interested and believe in it, then the secret has got to be something astounding or else everyone would know it. It's got to be something, what else do you want to call it? Astounding, miraculous, indescribable, or else everybody could describe it. Everyone would know it. It wouldn't be something that took you a lifetime to work for and then you still might not get it. So it's got to be something astounding. What if the secret, still using that kind of term, is not astounding? What if it can be put in words, what if it can be put in words and you could tell every sane person on this planet that and they go, well, yeah. I perhaps am exaggerating again by going, oh yeah. That is, understating it is exaggerating. And they went, oh yeah. Do you see that would, and we've got to change the level real quick now. Do you see that would make it the most exclusive information in the world? Okay, we'll try it again. If by the Enlightenment, a secret, that there is a piece of information, I'm just making this up, that the secret, the Enlightenment, tells everybody. It says, well, here's the old one, everybody likes this, that the Buddha and everyone, when they go, oh, what happens is their mind, their brain, it says, the purpose of life is so-and-so. That's the way it's normally been put, the purpose of life, that's the secret, okay? That it is a piece of information, a secret, a sentence, a piece of info that's known to but a few. If that's what it is, that would be exclusive enough, right? Because you're interested in such matters, you would probably figure, at least historically, publicly known, there are only a handful of people that apparently meet the criteria. Then you might imagine, well, there's got to have been more. But then you look around at life, you look around at what you've done, and you figure, well, they're not on every street corner. So, and plus you can just, if nothing else, you look around at the intellectual conflict in the world, known by many names, but you see what it is. If it's not fighting over survival physically, then everything else is a fighting over info, a conflict of theories, philosophies, religions, etc. Fighting over invisible territories. There's people who think that they should be staking out in this floating city of mental reality, that they have certain areas that they think should be predominant. My neighborhood, my opinions, my ideas, my philosophies. And that's the conflict that in a sense is non-existent. So if you see, once you grasp that, then the idea is there's a secret to life and it is a piece of information. And you think, well, nobody else knows it. And I look around, it's obvious they don't know it, or else they wouldn't be in conflict. That if that many people knew it, and you just realize that they've got to be, you might come to the conclusion that maybe there is no one ever knew it besides the famous figures, the 5 or 6 in history. Maybe that's why they're famous. Maybe they were the only ones. Because you look around and you realize the popes, the rabbis, the thinkers of the world, the religious, the political leaders, the historical, outstanding figures of history and today are still in conflict. So that's obvious. You don't need to go much further than that. You realize, well, they don't know. Either this is a huge facade, which we don't get in that gives everybody the red ass. That this whole thing is just a stage game and every swinging dick on this planet knows it but me. Nobody likes that one, I know. That brings everybody seriously. But if all you got to do is look around and you realize that there would not be this kind of conflict, period, if more people knew the secret, still assuming that you're already convinced, you're wired up genetically that you are convinced that there is something, that there is reality behind this kind of drive that makes you interested in this. So if there is a secret, then the first thing, without any doubt, you would realize, now we're talking exclusive, because it could be there's only been 5 or 6 people on this planet thus far that actually knew it. Now it's possible. Okay. Now that's exclusive. You follow me? But there's another level, and it's not just sequential. It's almost like taking the skin off of a baseball and turn it inside out. Take the skin off of a planet, which is, they don't call it a skin, what do they call it? Well, humanity some places. But anyway, and you turn it inside out. It's not just another sequential spatial level, but if that kind of secret about what life is, if only a few people ever knew it, that's exclusive. Huh? Huh? But there's something more exclusive. Is it, if it could be put in words, everybody already knows it. But only a few people see any significance. Only a few people can use it. I know that sometimes maybe it sounds too bland. How about this? Only a few people get the proper enjoyment from it. We're talking about another. What if everyone saw? What if everybody? You know, my fable about my creation myth. Everybody comes on this assembly line like a little Ken and Barbie doll, and it's like life sits right there and gives you a quick look to make sure that you're just reasonably acceptable. I'm not going to throw you in the coal pile. And you come by in that moment that I said that everyone looks life dead in the eye, or vice versa, just a split second, and everyone, with few exceptions, blinks and looks away. That's part of the sign that you are sane and acceptable up here. What if at that very moment is also the same moment, it is the same sort of moment as 30 years after that, a Buddha sitting somewhere and going, so, that you already underwent that. Just that fast. You were nonverbal, but you underwent this so. Now follow me. We're already talking about how exclusive that kind of secret would be. This is another level, another universe, another reality of exclusivity. Is it something that everybody knows genetically, because it's got to be tied in to the full nexus, the full wiring system of humanity. And you're not just one of the few people that know it now, one of the 5 or 6 or 10. You're one of the handful that enjoys it. Everybody else went. Which, the reason I backed up, for those of you following it, I want to point this out. We got a second? Yes. Instead of saying, giving you the description of what if the exclusivity is that everyone at one time, for a moment, had the enlightenment. The same as Buddha, the same thing. They went, so, but it was just like that, and they looked away. That would be exclusive enough. And I said, but what if the mystics, the 5 or 6 or 10 in the world, it's not that they knew something secret, is that they know this. They still know it, and they're the only ones, I said, get full use of it or understand its significance. That sounds too close sometimes to as though it would entail a duty. Like, well, that would put me on a mission. Or if I did see it, then this is serious business. I could be, you could be correct. I might be now one of the only 10 or 12 to realize the significance. My, what a weighty thing. That's when I changed it. Instead of it being, what if you're one of the few that recognize its significance? Not to this point. Stay with my original story. I hadn't changed that part. That everyone else has already had their moment of enlightenment. Everyone. If you're just middle of the parade sane, genetically, physically, normal, within the limits. That everyone had that, and that's only the few. They don't know a secret. They're the only ones that still remember it and see the significance. But significance sounds too serious. What if the mystics are the only ones that can still go so, and it just tickles the piss out of them? Well, that's kind of crude. It's the most enjoyment they have in life. Everybody else claims they get enjoyment of trying to make more money, beating up on people, looking down on people, gossiping about people, arguing with people, which that's fine. They're in the majority. Remember that. They're right. So you're really being childish to criticize it. What if you're the mystics of the world, not just the 5 or 10 or a dozen that know it? They're the only ones that enjoy it. I submit to you in conclusion that would drastically change the nature of the game. Submissions are free. I have done my duty for the night. Thank you. Drive carefully. or don't.